A Second Chance at Love. Previous episodes are available in playlist, a link is given in the video description. Episode 24. All the kids became teary-eyed when they saw him leaving. Roxanne also tilted her head down to hide her pain away. Jack's voice came to her cars at that moment. There are many similar cases, and all we can do is help them as much as possible. It is okay to be sad, but don't let it overwhelm you. Roxanne understood the logic behind it, but actually dealing with it was still a little challenging. The kid earlier was extremely polite and kind, so it was even more difficult to accept his unfortunate fate. Jack didn't say much else. He left her with a simple sentence. "There are other kids waiting for you." After saying that, he returned to his seat. Roxanne took a deep breath and shifted her gaze down to look at the kids standing next to her. Every single one of them was looking upward and staring at her with their big, round eyes. They were all on the verge of crying, and within those eyes was the most basic fear of all, the fear of death. They were worried about the boy who left and also scared that they'd meet the same fate. Seeing how terrified they were forced Roxanne to suppress her sorrow. Crouching down to look into the kids' eyes, she comforted them softly. "Don't worry, kids. We're here to protect you, so everyone will grow up safe and healthy. Your friend will be back soon as well." After that, she turned around quickly. She couldn't bear to keep looking into their eyes, so she fumbled a little when she stood back up. Still, she pretended to be calm as she pawed the bed and asked, "Okay, who's next?" Quite a bit of time passed before a kid fearfully climbed onto the bed. Roxanne glanced at him. Her heart was heavy when she treated him. Fortunately, the rest of the kids she had with her had minor problems, and she could cure them on her own. The bad news, however, was that the 3 other doctors there had to deal with quite a few kids in bad condition. Every now and then, someone would leave the place to go to the hospital. Everyone was understandably upset each time a kid left. Daniel watched as more and more kids left, and the frown on his face became more intense. At the end of the day, he was still a traditional medicine practitioner. He might get jealous easily and could be arrogant sometimes, but the kindness every doctor possessed remained alive within him. They worked until the afternoon when the orphanage served lunch in the cafeteria and had everyone go there. Roxanne and the others stopped working, but their hearts remained heavy. They handled the remaining kids and took everyone to the cafeteria. No one knew what had happened. Perhaps the kids who left Roxanne's and the others' cubicle had said something. But almost every kid in the orphanage was staring at Roxanne during lunch. The other doctors couldn't suppress their curiosity and were looking at her as well. Sensing everybody's gaze, Roxanne felt as though she was sitting on pins and needles. "Miss?" asked a kid as he cautiously approached Roxanne while still holding his tray of food. Hearing that cute voice had Roxanne turning her attention to the kid. She smiled and asked, "What is it?" The kid stared for a bit before asking, "The others said that the candy you gave out is delicious. Can I have one?" Roxanne was stunned for a few seconds before she came around. She smiled and grabbed a few sweets from her purse before handing them to the kid. "Here are a few flavors. If you like them, I will bring more the next time I drop by." The kid grinned shyly. He grabbed the drumstick from his tray and handed it to Roxanne before speaking in his sweet voice. "Thank you, miss. I know you have been working hard as well, so here. I love drumsticks, but I'll give this one to you." Roxanne was surprised when she heard what the kid said. When she returned to her senses, she smiled at the kid as a complex emotion bubbled up within her. "Thank you." The kid smiled shyly before turning around and leaving. "It looks like the little ones like you a lot, Roxanne." Alongside Jack, Larry walked over with a plate of food in his hands and sat across from Roxanne. Roxanne greeted him by bobbing her head. After smiling at Jack, she turned around and teased Larry, "I've more experience taking care of kids than you. Besides, I always carry some sweets just in case I need to use them to coax children. It's effective, isn't it?" If it were not for the sweets, Roxanne believed the children would not have cooperated with her no matter how much they liked her. Jack concurred, "It's indeed a good trick. We can use it on the children during our medical consultations next time." Roxanne froze for a moment and pressed her lips into a thin line. "It's just something I learned from experience since I need to handle my kids." Jack did not continue with the topic as he was more concerned with her mental state. "There will be more children coming in the afternoon. Do you want to take a break, Dr. Jarvis? You must be exhausted." Roxanne shook her head and gave a serious answer. "I can handle it. I'd undertaken tougher tasks when I was overseas. These kids need me, and I can't just walk away from them." She came here today because she wanted to win the trust of the Damaris family. She also hoped to take this opportunity to convince the family to collaborate with her. But after seeing how sickly the children were, Roxanne abandoned all her initial thoughts. She just wanted to try her best to treat those little ones. All these children were almost the same age as Archie and Benny, and they reminded Roxanne of her two sons and the girl who had passed away at a young age. Compared to the fate of these frail children, the exhaustion she experienced was nothing. Upon hearing that, Jack was astonished by the woman's determination. To Jack, carrying out medical consultations round the clock was already an unbearable burden, even for a man. He could not picture how intense Roxanne's workload must have been when she was overseas. Out of curiosity, Jack turned to glance at Larry. Larry nodded steadily. "You heard that right. The woman standing in front of you is a fighter." Roxanne grinned but kept mum. During the conversation, someone came up and sat beside them. Roxanne whipped her head around in the person's direction and saw Daniel awkwardly sitting beside her. When she saw Daniel's face, she instantly recalled how he treated her earlier and wondered if he had come to find fault with her again. All the other doctors looked over. They even wished to bring their plates over and watch the drama unfold. "Is there anything I can help you with, Dr. Hop?" Larry initiated the conversation with Daniel as if he was trying to protect Roxanne. Upon noticing the hostile tone in his voice, Daniel knitted his brows. He looked in Roxanne's direction and asked stiffly, "Why did you help me just now?" That question took Roxanne by surprise. "Why did you help me persuade the children even though I've been finding fault with you?" Daniel asked her another question. Upon hearing that, Roxanne responded with a casual smile. "Because I believe you're not just a respected expert in traditional medicine but also an ethical doctor. You've been picking holes in everything I did, but I know you wouldn't vent your frustration on the kids. I'm sure you only wanted to give them the best treatment." Daniel looked at her in disbelief. He did not exactly believe what she said. Even he himself felt he had gone overboard earlier. No one else would have been able to handle the situation as calmly as Roxanne did. Yet, it seemed she truly had not taken his words to heart. Upon noticing the puzzled look on his face, Roxanne explained with a smile. I've been in the industry for quite some years now, and I've encountered countless people who doubted me, and some of them even gave me terrible attitude. Thus, I wasn't bothered when you questioned my medical skills, but what annoyed me was how impatient you were with the kids. Since you've apologized, let's not dwell in the past anymore. I believe all the traditional medicine doctors are virtuous, and I also believe the Damaris family would have selected the best candidates for this mission. The way the crowd looked at Roxanne instantly became friendlier when they heard what she said. What Roxanne said was what they had in mind. They, too, believed that all traditional medicine practitioners were trustworthy and virtuous. Even doctors were bound to make mistakes, but as long as they treated their patients sincerely, they deserved the professional title. That was why no one dared to question Daniel's status even though he had been arrogant all these years. Daniel was silent for a while and eventually responded with a nod. I'm so used to being put on a pedestal that I failed to see the bigger picture. I'm sorry, Dr. Jarvis. Please forgive my demeanor earlier. I hope we can interact and get to know each other better. Roxanne smiled and replied, sure. But Dr. Hop, please don't frighten the kids in the afternoon anymore. They can't take it, she quipped. Blushing in embarrassment, Daniel responded with a nod. I was too impulsive in the morning. Thank goodness you stopped me. Otherwise, I wouldn't know how to face the kid. Now that Daniel had calmed himself down, he was overwhelmed by a pang of guilt for nearly paralyzing a child in the morning. Roxanne gave him a comforting grin. The kid is fine, so don't be too hard on yourself. Let's do our best to treat the other children in the afternoon. Daniel agreed without hesitation. Lack arched his brows as he did not expect the two to reconcile their differences in such a short time. He felt there was something unusual about Roxanne. After apologizing to Roxanne, Daniel turned around and looked at Jack. He apologized to Jack sincerely, I'm sorry, Mr. Damaris. I nearly tarnished the Damaris family's reputation. If words got out that the Damaris family was responsible for causing the child to become paralyzed, the news would have smeared the family's good name. Jack instantly put on a serious face when Daniel mentioned the Damaris family. You're right, but I can turn a blind eye to it since it was a false alarm. Dr. Hop, I hope you can give your all to treat the children. The Damaris family organized this medical consultation for underprivileged children because we want to provide them with better healthcare services. That's why we gathered excellent doctors from all over the country to participate in the initiative. Please note that this is not a platform for you to compete with each other. Jack had not raised his voice, but the doctors around him could hear him loud and clear. They started responding to his remark. Don't worry, Mr. Damaris. We'll do our best. Jack gave the crowd a curt nod. Roxanne took a sidelong glance at the people around her and realized they were no longer shooting doubtful and curious looks at her. Instead, the way they looked at her had become friendlier. Roxanne gave each of them a faint smile before continuing with her lunch. After the little interlude between Daniel and Roxanne, the meal could be considered a jovial one. When lunch was over, the doctors grouped up according to their respective cubicles and walked back together. The children obediently followed behind. Many doctors had already formed a friendly bond with the children. The children crowded around Roxanne, causing Jack and the others to find it rather hard to move along. With some difficulty, they reached the entrance to their cubicle, and the candy in Roxanne's purse was nearly all gone. When they entered, Daniel still had some candy left. Hence, he seemed more popular than Roxanne as the children crowded around him with smiles. They appeared to have forgotten the unhappy incident from the morning. It was heartwarming for Roxanne to see the children growing so fond of Daniel. She knew children well. They were not one to hold a grudge. No matter what one did to them, as long as one treated them sincerely, they would reciprocate with genuine affection. These children were just the same. When Daniel had nearly given away all his candy, Roxanne clapped her hands and told the children to come back and line up. "Darlings, it's time for you to receive your treatment." Fortunately, the children in the cubicle had complete trust in them by now, and they were obedient even without bribing them with candy. When they heard Roxanne's words, the little ones lined up almost immediately and waited quietly. The four adults looked at the children and exchanged glances, smiling. Then they began to diagnose and treat the little kids. Not long afterward, there was a cautious knocking on the cubicle door. Everyone looked in the direction of the sound. "Mr. Damaris, a batch of supplies was sent to the door of the orphanage, and we were informed that it is for us." The staff stood at the door, waiting for Jack's instructions. Everyone was stunned at this news. The free medical consultation was already in progress, so why would someone suddenly send supplies? Furthermore, Jack had not been informed of this beforehand. After returning to his senses, Jack frowned and responded. "Ask them to return it to the sender, and tell them that the Damaris family will not accept any supplies provided by outside sources when giving out free medical consultations." Over the years, for the sake of their patients' safety, most of the Damaris family's resources were procured by themselves. Even when supplies were needed, they would contact other prestigious families in advance and would not accept any donations from unknown sources. After all, they could not ascertain that the materials donated were of good quality. If there was a problem with the materials, the Damaris family was responsible for the patients. The staff member hesitated, asking, "It's from the Queen family. Should we reject it?" At that, Jack and Larry turned to Roxanne instinctively. Among them, Roxanne was the only person with any connection to the Queen family and the reason that they would donate supplies. Even though the Damaris and Queen families were on good terms, the Queens had never offered any help to the Damaris family before. It was only after recommending Roxanne did they send materials. Hence, it was only logical for one to conclude that Roxanne was the reason. Noticing the two's gaze, Roxanne quickly waved her hands with a bewildered expression on her face. To her, it was good enough for the Queen family to recommend her. As for the donation of these materials, she had not heard either Alfred or Jonathan mention it. Seeing Roxanne's reaction, the two finally understood what was going on. Meanwhile, the staff was urging with caution. "Mr. Damaris, those materials, if those materials had been sent by anyone else, he would not hesitate to return them to the sender. However, knowing about the goodwill between the Queens and the Damaris family, he had to consult Jack first. Jack relented and instructed, "Tell them to bring it in," then. Obeying his orders, the staff member turned around and went out. After that, Jack went out to check the goods. Before he left, he called Roxanne and Larry to come with him. Soon, the delivery truck drove into the compound, followed by 3 ambulances. Rex jumped down from the truck and greeted the 3 respectfully. Jack and Larry were meeting him for the first time, but it was obvious that Roxanne knew him. They both glanced at her, gesturing at her to speak for them. Roxanne got the message, and she nodded politely at Rex, asking, "Mr. Tanner. This is?" Rex smiled and replied, "It's like this. Mr. Queen said that the children in the orphanage are very pitiful, and knowing that the Damaris family is here giving free consultations, he sent me over to deliver some supplies to the children. They are nothing valuable but rather some clothes, bedding, and so on. We should have sent medical supplies, but Mr. Queen said that the Damaris family did not lack those, so he sent daily necessities instead." Jack nodded and asked the director of the orphanage to check the items. The Damaris family merely provided free medical consultation for the kids, and hence, had never taken these daily necessities into consideration. Roxanne looked at the 3 ambulances which followed behind the truck. "What about those ambulances at the back?" Rex explained, "These ambulances are all owned by the Queen family's private hospital. Mr. Queen said that the facilities here might be insufficient. If necessary, the children can be sent to the Queen family's hospital, and the Queen family will give them free treatment." The 3 nodded in unison, but their hearts were full of misgivings. Jack had no knowledge of Roxanne's personal life except for the fact that Alfred admired her deeply. Thus, Jonathan's actions naturally aroused suspicion about his relationship with Roxanne. Even though Larry was familiar with Roxanne's past, seeing the consideration Jonathan showed her, he could not help but wonder about their relationship too. Roxanne was unaware of the other 2's thoughtful looks. Even though she, too, felt that Jonathan's actions were rather strange, she smiled and thanked Rex. "That's very kind of Mr. Queen. Thank you, too, for making this trip. We thank all of you on behalf of the children." Rex waved his hand. "This is my duty. It's no problem at all. I'll convey your thanks to Mr. Queen." Roxanne smiled. The director came over in a hurry. Seeing the truck full of supplies, he thanked Rex again. After the goods were deemed more than sufficient, Rex did not hang around but bid them goodbye and left. Roxanne and the others returned to their cubicle. The kids were crowded around Daniel, and some cheeky ones were even mimicking the way he was checking a patient's pulse. Noticing the adults coming back, the children returned to their positions. Roxanne looked at them apologetically. "Sorry for making you wait so long." The children shook their heads. "We only waited for a short while. You all work so hard, so you should take a break." Seeing the children behaving so well, Roxanne felt her heart melting. "What did the Queen family send?" Daniel asked out of curiosity as they had not brought anything in. The 3 gave a brief explanation of what happened just now. Daniel nodded but was puzzled about why the Queen family showed such kindness to the children. His thoughts then turned to Roxanne, who had been recommended by the Queen family. Naturally, he put 2 and 2 together. Roxanne had no idea what the others were speculating about. Instead, she focused on doing her best to treat the children. The medical consultation only ended at night. By the time all the children in the orphanage had received their treatments, the doctors were utterly exhausted. Roxanne was also aching all over. However, the thought of those children getting better made her feel glad. Those who suffered from more serious conditions had been sent to the hospital as well. During the whole ordeal, she almost forgot about her original intention of being there. All she cared about was the children. The children were all lined up in the courtyard when the doctors walked out of the cubicles. Led by the director of the orphanage, the children bowed in unison and said, "Thank you, doctors." The group of doctors was taken aback. It was their first time doing a free medical consultation for orphans and also the first time they encountered such a situation. Thus, they could not help but feel touched. Some of them even teared up. So did Roxanne. She clenched her fists with all her might to stop herself from crying. Roxanne then caressed the head of the girl standing right in front before reminding her. "Take good care of the younger ones. If you need any help, you may ask the director to get in touch with me." The girl nodded fervently. She seemed reluctant to let Roxanne go. Roxanne felt the same way about the children too. However, the thought of Archie and Benny waiting for her at home made her walk away. Jack gave a concluding speech and some reminders to the children before the medical consultation was officially over. Just as the doctors were making a move, Jack turned around and bowed solemnly at all of them. "This medical consultation has been a great success, and it's all thanks to each and every one of you. All of you are outstanding doctors. And I hope you will continue to do well in this industry. Goodbye, and I hope to see all of you again." It had been a pleasant cooperation. When everyone saw how humble he was, their impression of the Damaris family became even better, and they smiled in response. Very soon, all the doctors left, and the Damaris family stayed on to clear up. Just as Roxanne was also about to leave, Jack called out to her, "Dr. Jarvis." Roxanne stopped and turned around. Since Larry was walking with her and he was quite close to Jack, he stopped as well. Jack smiled at Roxanne and apologized. "After giving it some thought, I feel that I must apologize to you." Roxanne frowned and looked confused. Based on what she could recall, it had been a lovely day working with Jack. She could not see why he had to apologize to her. "When I met you this morning, I had doubts about your medical skill. But after one whole day of interaction, you have changed my perception. You are indeed a very outstanding doctor in every aspect. I apologize to you for doubting your skill earlier on," said Jack seriously. Roxanne could not help but laugh. "It's fine. I don't mind. But, I had no idea that you had doubts about me." In fact, she had even been praising the Damaris family in her mind for teaching their children so well. By the look of it, it was true. They were adept at hiding their true feelings too. Jack knew she was joking, but he merely smiled. After a while, Jack extended his hand toward Roxanne and said, "I hope we can work together in the future when the opportunity arises." Roxanne accepted his handshake and responded in all seriousness, "I look forward to it." There was still some work to be done, so Jack stayed back and bade the two of them farewell. Both Larry and Roxanne left the orphanage. Larry looked at her and smiled. So, what do you think of the medical consultation today? Judging from Mr. Damaris' reaction, you should have attained your objective. It was only then realization dawned on Roxanne. She had placed all her focus on the children and forgot she was there to gain the support of the Damaris family. To her, the children were more important. As it turned out, she had helped the children and won Jack over at the same time. His behavior earlier on was proof enough of her success. Roxanne's eyes sparkled with excitement when she realized that. She turned and thanked Larry. "Thank you for helping me today, Larry." Larry raised his brows and said, "I don't recall helping you with anything at all." Roxanne then started to list the things he had helped her with. "In the morning, you must have told Mr. Damaris lots of good things about me. With you around, I was also not that nervous. Furthermore, when Dr. Hop made things difficult for me, you stood up for me." Seeing the exaggerated manner she was listing the ways he had helped her, Larry stopped her from counting and said, "I only told Mr. Damaris that you were a student of Professor Lambert and nothing else. As for the rest, that wasn't why Jack noticed your medical skill. Here's no need to thank me." Roxanne pursed her lips and smiled. Larry's eyes darkened as he added meaningfully, "If you want to thank someone, I think you should thank Mr. Queen." Roxanne was surprised when she heard that. However, she returned to her senses very quickly and explained, "I have no idea what's up with those supplies either. Larry, please don't get the wrong idea." Unfortunately, Larry was still suspicious. "If I recall correctly, the Queen family is the reason why you got to attend the medical consultation. On top of that, you also know the person who delivered the supplies. In other words, those supplies had been delivered specifically for Roxanne since the Queen family had sent someone she knew." Roxanne did not expect that to cause a misunderstanding and tried her best to clarify things. "Mr. Tanner from Queen Group is in charge of the herbs, and I knew him through the Research Institute. Perhaps, Mr. Queen sent him to make things easier. There's nothing between the two of us." Larry studied her carefully. Seeing that nothing amiss with her behavior, he finally nodded and advised her, "Fine. I only want to remind you to consider Archie and Benny's feelings when you find a partner. Whoever you choose to be with will end up being their father. The boys have always been smart. Now that they are quite grown up, they are bound to have their own opinions." Roxanne nodded and said, "I understand." At the mention of Archie and Benny, Roxanne could not help but remember the children at the orphanage. She started to feel depressed. Larry knew what was on her mind and patted her arm. "We have done whatever we can. Let's leave the rest to fate. Those children are very pitiful indeed. I hope God has mercy on them and give them a fighting chance." Roxanne nodded in agreement, but she felt helpless. "If only my medical skill were better, we might not have to send as many children to the hospital today. If only I had studied more about ancient medicine, then I may have been able to cure the children of more diseases. Don't think too much. It's getting late now. Both Archie and Benny are still waiting for you," consoled Larry. That was when Roxanne snapped out of her reverie, said goodbye to him, and left. It was late at night by the time Roxanne arrived home. However, Archie and Benny were still awake. They opened their bedroom door carefully and stuck their heads out when they heard her coming up the stairs. Roxanne grew heavy-hearted as she was reminded of the kids at the orphanage when she saw the boys. Seeing her expression, the boys ran over to her and asked in concern, "Mommy, what's wrong? Did something happen at the medical consultation today?" Roxanne forced out a smile and led them back to the room. The boys flanked Roxanne and stared at her earnestly. "Mommy, how are the children in the orphanage?" Roxanne shook her head ruefully. "They don't have parents. In fact, some of them were abandoned by their parents because they were sick. However, they are still very obedient and understanding." Images of those kids lying on the bed flashed through her mind, as well as those who were sent to the hospital because the doctors were helpless to treat them. After learning about their condition, the children hadn't forgotten to thank the doctors. Archie and Benny shared a look as their expressions grew stern. They asked carefully, "Are the children very ill?" Roxanne inclined her head gently. "Some were abandoned by their parents at the orphanage as their parents couldn't afford to save them." "Mommy, can't you save them either?" Benny gazed at her innocently. To him, Roxanne was the best doctor in the world and was capable of treating all kinds of illnesses. Roxanne patted his head in resignation and explained, "Sorry, darling. I'm not as capable as you think. There are many diseases that I can't cure." Hearing that, Archie and Benny frowned in disappointment. They then offered Roxanne some comforting words. "Never mind, Mommy. Someone else will come out with a way to save them. Children are blessed, so will surely grow up healthily." The kids at the orphanage were so sick that Roxanne couldn't be of help. Archie and Benny were disappointed, but they knew their mother was definitely more depressed than them at the thought. Hearing their comforting words, Roxanne pursed her lips and flashed a smile. "That's what I think, too, but they don't have parents. They must be sad," Benny said as he stared at Roxanne earnestly. "I have Mommy, but sometimes, I still wish that Daddy is with me. The children at the orphanage don't even have a mommy. I feel sorry for them." Roxanne bobbed her head as her lips curved into a stiff smile. "Their new daddies and mommies will bring them home soon." Benny tilted his head and asked gingerly, "Do the people at the orphanage treat them well? Do they get to eat and sleep well?" Knowing he was worried about the kids, Roxanne grinned and assured him, "The people at the orphanage treat them well." This afternoon, Mr. Queen donated some supplies to the orphanage, so their situation will get better. If you're still worried, I can bring you two there to visit them someday. Archie's and Benny's eyes lit up in delight. "Really? Can we really visit them?" Roxanne smiled as she nodded. "We need to bring many delicious food and toys for them," the boys enthused. Roxanne was pleased by how caring they were. It was getting late, so Roxanne chatted with the boys briefly before putting them to bed. After they fell asleep, she returned to her own room. Roxanne was physically and mentally exhausted after working hard the entire day. She washed up quickly and went to bed. The following day, Roxanne woke up and headed to the research institute. The staff knew that she had participated in the Damaris family's medical consultation yesterday, so they immediately came to her to ask her about it. "Dr. Jarvis, how did the medical consultation go? Are the Damarises that skilled in medicine as the rumors claimed?" A barrage of questions sounded in Roxanne's ears. Her lips curled up as she explained. The Damaris family's medical consultation isn't as mysterious as you think. Think of it as an ordinary medical consultation that normal hospitals offer. As for their medical skills, I don't have the right to comment on that. However, seeing how influential they are, they must be more capable than the usual doctors. Everyone had been too busy treating the children to notice whether the other doctors were equipped with exceptional skills. However, it was clear that they were excellent in some way as they were able to gather so many reputable doctors. Besides, Roxanne was also impressed by the medical equipment invented by the Damaris family. Hearing that, everyone stopped asking about the Damaris family and instead quizzed her about the medical consultation. Roxanne remained patient and told them everything they wanted to know. Colby interrupted the crowd's questions and led Roxanne out of the research facility before things got out of hand. The Damaris family has plans to build a research institute, right? Did they say anything before you left? He questioned. Roxanne's brows knitted, for she wasn't sure of that. I don't know. They said nothing of the sort during the medical consultation yesterday, and I couldn't ask them outright gut, she told Colby truthfully. A deep line appeared between Colby's brows. Did they notice you? He asked anxiously. He knew why Roxanne decided to join the medical consultation. She wanted to establish connections with the Damaris family and exchange ideas regarding the medical industry. She also wanted to collaborate with the Damaris family to elevate their research institute to a higher position. Never mind if the Damaris family didn't mention the research institute. I wonder if Roxanne managed to befriend any of them. Roxanne appeared hesitant. I think so. But he only acknowledged my medical skills and said nothing else. After all, Jack hadn't even asked for her contact details before he left the venue. Thus, it was pretty hard for her to contact the Damaris family in the future. Holding that thought, Roxanne let out a sigh of regret. I'm afraid I won't get the opportunity to read the ancient medicine books that the Damaris family has. Colby fell silent for a moment before he patted her on the shoulder. Never mind. It's enough that they acknowledged your medical skills. There are many doctors in the country, but only a few manage to catch the Damaris family's attention. You're now one of them. Hearing his encouraging words, Roxanne chuckled gaily. You're right. I don't know if I've achieved my initial goal, but what we did yesterday was more meaningful than my goal. I nursed many kids back to health, so it doesn't matter even if the Damaris family didn't notice me. Admiration flashed across Colby's gaze. I'm glad you think that way. At noon, everyone in the research institute gathered for lunch to celebrate the success of the medical consultation yesterday. After lunch, Roxanne drove to the Queen residence. It was all thanks to Alfred that she got to participate in the medical consultation, so she had to offer her gratitude to him personally. The Queen family had also delivered some supplies last afternoon, so she also wanted to thank them on behalf of the kids at the orphanage. While she was at it, she needed to ask them what that was about too. On the way there, she gave Jonathan a call to inform him of her arrival. When she arrived at the Queen residence, Jonathan was already waiting in the living room. Seeing her, he got to his feet and gave her a welcoming smile. Dr. Jarvis, are you here to visit my grandpa? He's resting upstairs. Should I ask him to come down now? Roxanne chuckled and shook her head. I don't mind waiting. I need to talk to you, too. Jonathan arched a brow in confusion. What is it about? After they sat on the couch, Roxanne parted her lips and said, last afternoon, Rex delivered a huge bunch of supplies to the orphanage. He told me you gave him the order, so I'd like to thank you on behalf of the children in the orphanage. Jonathan nodded and flashed a knowing smile. Yes, you should say thank you. But you shouldn't be thanking me. Roxanne was taken aback. Was it old Mr. Queen's order? That was the only possibility she could come up with. Jonathan shook his head. For a moment there, Roxanne was lost. It was Lucian's idea. Jonathan explained slowly, Lucian paid for the supplies. He also forked out his own money for the kids' treatment in Queen Hospital. All I did was send my men to carry out the job. If you want to thank the contributor, you should thank Lucian. Roxanne's frown deepened when she heard his explanation. I can't believe it was Lucian. Why did he do this? There is no need for Farwell Group to get closer to the Damaris family with their influence. Besides, Lucian used the Queen family name to get it done. Roxanne was puzzled. Seeing her bafflement, Jonathan chuckled. I don't know why he did that, though. Perhaps you should ask him personally. Before she could reply, he got to his feet. I believe my grandpa's up. I'll go get him now. By the time Roxanne regained her composure, he was already going up the stairs. About a dozen thoughts crossed Roxanne's mind, and she was utterly confused. Naturally, she wasn't going to contact Lucian to find out why he did that. However, she couldn't figure out the reason for his actions. She was deep in thought when Jonathan appeared at the top of the stairs and helped Alfred down. Hearing their footsteps, Roxanne set her thoughts aside and rose to her feet to greet Alfred. How was the medical consultation yesterday? Asked Alfred. Roxanne answered him cheerfully. Thank you for giving me the chance to participate in the medical consultation, old Mr. Queen. It was really meaningful, and I learned many things that aren't usually made available to me. Feeling pleased, Alfred bobbed his head. I knew this wouldn't be a fruitless experience for you as you're smart. What about the Damaris family? Did they comment on your skills? Jonathan chimed in, my grandpa put in a good word for you with old Mr. Damaris. Roxanne flashed a grateful smile. Damaris treated the doctors similarly, so I can't be sure what he thinks of me. However, what the Damaris family thinks of me isn't important to me anymore. I'm glad that I got the chance to participate in the medical consultation. They chatted briefly. As the sky was turning dark, Roxanne got up and bid goodbye to them. When she got home, Archie and Benny were already there. Lissa had also already prepared dinner. Roxanne and the boys had their meal together. After dinner, she played with them and waited until they fell asleep before going back to her room. Roxanne lay in bed. She couldn't help but think about what Jonathan had told her that afternoon. It was Lucian who told Jonathan to deliver the supplies. Why did he do that? Jonathan even told me to ask him his motive personally. Roxanne had a feeling that Jonathan knew something. Why does it feel like there's a hidden meaning in his words? Conflicting emotions welled up in Roxanne when she came to that conclusion. As her mind wandered, she slowly fell asleep. Roxanne was awoken by the sound of her phone ringing early the following morning when she looked at the caller ID. She realized it was from a number she did not recognize. Roxanne hadn't slept well last night and was woken up rudely by an unknown number, so she answered the call gruffly and demanded in a hoarse voice, "Who is this?" A few seconds later, the person on the other end of the line chuckled and replied, "It's me, Jack Damaris. Did I wake you up, Dr. Jarvis?" Roxanne jerked awake and sat up in bed. Rubbing her eyes, she told him, "No. I'm usually awake at this hour, but I fell asleep later than usual last night." Jack laughed understandingly. "Mr. Damaris, how did you get my phone number?" Roxanne was still in a daze. "I remember Jack didn't get my contact details previously." Jack replied cheerfully, "I got your number from old Mr. Queen. Sorry for the abrupt call, Dr. Jarvis." Roxanne quickly waved his concern away. "Oh, it's fine. Why did you call me this early, though?" Jack glanced at the old man clad in a traditional outfit beside him. The old man gave him a curt nod. Jack parted his lips and revealed, "Well, I need to discuss something with you. I think we should meet up and talk in person, though. Dr. Jarvis, are you free to have a chat?" A thought flashed past Roxanne's mind, and she immediately brightened up. "Mr. Damaris, I can meet you anytime. Will this afternoon do?" "I'll send you the location later," Jack suggested. Roxanne agreed to his suggestion at once. After the call ended, Roxanne felt nervous. Jack went through the trouble just to contact her, so the only possibility was that the Damaris family wanted to collaborate with their research institute. That was what she had hoped for all along. Now that her wish was going to come true, Roxanne grew increasingly anxious. "Hopefully, I don't mess up when we meet this afternoon." After breakfast, Roxanne called Colby. Colby was already at the research institute. He had changed his clothes and was about to head into the research facility when he received Roxanne's call. "Dr. Jarvis, what is it?" Roxanne explained, "I won't be going to the research institute today. The Damaris family just called me and asked to meet with me today, so please handle all the affairs at the research institute." The same thought popped up in Colby's mind, too. He agreed readily. "Sure. Don't worry about the research institute and focus on your discussion with the Damaris family. Don't get stressed out." Roxanne agreed without hesitation. The meeting with the Damaris family was important, so Roxanne dressed up to show her sincerity. That afternoon, she arrived at the cafe earlier than the agreed time. Shortly after, she spotted Jack leading an elderly man into the cafe. The gray-haired man who resembled Jack was skinny and wearing a traditional outfit. It only took one look for her to guess how they were related to each other. Shocked, Roxanne got up hurriedly. She waited until they both came to a stop in front of her before giving the elderly man a polite bow. The man gave her a kind smile and observed her carefully. Roxanne had put on light makeup and tied her hair up to reveal her delicate features and swan-like neck. She looked beautiful and demure, dressed in a simple but elegant long dress. Sensing his gaze, Roxanne stood in her spot and allowed him to observe him as a smile played on her lips. A while later, the old man looked away and gestured at Jack. "Dr. Jarvis, sorry to keep you waiting." Jack helped the old man into a seat across from Roxanne, then introduced them to each other. "This is my grandfather, the head of the Damaris family. You can call me old Mr. Damaris, Hector Damaris interjected cheerfully. He seemed kind and friendly, so Roxanne flashed a warm smile. Hello, old Mr. Damaris. Hector nodded genially and went straight to the topic. I asked you out today for a talk as Jack told me you did a great job at the medical consultation yesterday. Roxanne nodded obediently to indicate that she was listening. Jack told me that the acupuncture skills you used seemed old school and differed from everyone else's. Where did you learn them from? Hector gazed at her curiously. Roxanne wasn't about to lie to him, so she replied honestly, my mentor was interested in ancient medicine, so I was lucky enough to have read some related books in his house. After that, I worked hard and received some help from my mentor to develop the acupuncture treatment myself. Hector nodded thoughtfully as he shot Roxanne an approving look. Roxanne mentioned that her acupuncture skills were derived from ancient medicine books and that she received help from Harvey, but Hector had been in the industry long enough to know that one would only succeed if one worked hard enough. It was clear that Roxanne had worked hard to develop her own unique acupuncture skills. Before the medical consultation, old Mr. Queen would lavish praises on you whenever he contacted me. After the medical consultation ended, Jack came to me and told me you're a rare and talented doctor. Now that we finally got to meet in person, I realize they are telling the truth, Hector commented. Roxanne glanced at Jack subconsciously, for she had no idea he would mention her before Hector. Jack merely smiled in response. I love researching, that's all. There are many great traditional medicine doctors in the country, so I might not be as capable as them. LD Mr. Damaris, I don't deserve your praise. Hector waved his hand. You might not have that much experience, but I've been in this industry long enough, and my judgment is always accurate. You'll be the cream of the crop internationally one day. Roxanne was touched to hear that and thanked him gratefully. I do hope so, old Mr. Damaris. Hector responded with a joyful grin. After having some small talk, Hector cut to the chase and said, I heard from Alfred that you're interested in the Damaris family's plan to set up the research institute and thinking of collaborating with us, aren't you? Hearing that, Roxanne perked up in an instant. Wearing a look of solemnity, she stated earnestly, I've always been interested in traditional medicine. I'm more than happy to know that the Damaris family will set up a research institute specializing in this field. Or to mention, your family has been leading in the field all this while. Thus, I wish to grab this opportunity to collaborate with your family as I believe it'll boost my advancement in traditional medicine too. Hector scrutinized Roxanne for quite a while with a smile. Apparently, he was utterly pleased with her explanation. Roxanne put up a good front, but she could not help having her heart in her mouth. She knew that she should not let the chance slip away that round. Even though Hector was undoubtedly satisfied with her, she was still worried that things might go south. However, there was still no response from Hector after a while. Clenching her fists, Roxanne looked into his eyes with determination. Old Mr. Damaris, I hope you can give me a chance. I'll put in the effort and won't let you down. Only then did Hector nod gradually. Of course, I'll give you a chance. Buoyed up by his words, Roxanne was flushed with joy and at a loss as to what to do. She had to tighten the clench of her fists to get a grip on herself. You did well during the medical consultation, but I can't help feeling regretful. Hector switched the topic abruptly. There was a slight change in Roxanne's countenance, her heart skipped a beat. She could not wrap her head around his stance. Sensing her anxiousness, Hector flashed her a reassuring smile. Don't worry. Since I've mentioned that I'll give you a chance, I won't take back my words. I'm actually feeling regretful for not being able to see how well you displayed your skills with my own eyes. Anyway, I hope there'll be a chance for me to witness that during our collaboration in the near future. Roxanne heaved a sigh of relief and nodded agreeably. Sure, old Mr. Damaris, thanks for giving me this chance. It's an honor to be able to collaborate with the Damaris family. I'll prove myself for sure. Hector began taking a fancy to her as time elapsed. Seeing how she swallowed her pride, he could not resist chuckling. There's no need for formality. After all, I'm closely acquainted with Alfred. He keeps reminding me to give you more opportunities too. Treat me as if I were him. Feeling a little awkward, Roxanne pursed her lips and smiled. Hector added casually, I'd met your professor long ago. Even though he's been overseas throughout these years, he's contributed a lot to Chennara with the medicine from his research. Now that I think about it, it's been quite a while since I last met him. I wonder how he's been doing lately. Roxanne could sense that Hector was trying to let her feel more relaxed. She smiled gratefully. Professor Lambert has set up a research institute overseas. Apart from that, the one I'm currently working for was set up by him too. I bet he'll be overjoyed once he knows I have the opportunity to collaborate with the Damaris family. Hector nodded slightly. Let's have a meal together when he's back. Roxanne agreed at once. I'll convey your message to him. They chatted for the whole afternoon till it started to turn dark gradually. Feeling a bit tired, Hector returned to the topic. Jack is in charge of the research institute. If anything arises in the future, you can liaise with each other directly. After exchanging contact numbers with Roxanne, Jack held onto Hector's arm and left with him. Alfred was well aware that Hector had met up with Roxanne earlier that day. After dinner that night, he gave Hector a call to have a grasp of their collaboration. Meanwhile, Jonathan was seated alongside him. After knowing that the Damaris family had agreed to collaborate with Roxanne, he notified Lucian without hesitation in the meantime. Lucian had just put Estella to sleep when he received Jonathan's call. Yes. Let me tell you some great news. The Damaris family has agreed to collaborate with Dr. Jarvis. Thus, I suppose she'll not fly overseas temporarily. Jonathan responded with sheer blissfulness in his tone. Lucian arched his brows and nodded pleasantly. Well done. From the other end of the line, Jonathan's voice sounded again. Even so, it implies that Dr. Jarvis will have to deal with the young heir from the Damaris family for a certain period after this. Lucian knitted his brows. What do you mean? Jack Damaris will be in charge of the Damaris family's research institute. You know him, don't you? Jonathan replied with utter schadenfreude in his tone. Lucian's frown deepened into a scowl instantaneously. Undeniably, the Farwell family did not have expertise in the medical field. Nonetheless, he had run into the so-called young heir of the Damaris family several times. Jonathan added insult to injury by elucidating further, Mr. Damaris is the heir of the Damaris family. Not only that, his medical skills are the most outstanding among the young generation of the Damaris family. As for his looks, you had seen him in person before, right? He has quite a pleasant temperament too. I heard old Mr. Damaris was willing to collaborate with Dr. Jarvis partly because Mr. Damaris had helped pull some strings for her. So what? There was intense displeasure in Lucian's voice. Jonathan raised his brows. Dr. Jarvis and Mr. Damaris are not only single but also from the same profession. I'm convinced that they'll have a lot of common topics later. What's more, they are both outstanding. If they get to liaise with each other more, I'm afraid. 5. Though Jonathan did not finish his words, Lucian had a clear insight into his mind. Unequivocally, Roxanne and Jack matched each other perfectly well and might fall for each other in the long run. If so, Lucian's effort would go down the drain. At the thought of that, Lucian's expression darkened. He was frustrated enough with Larry by Roxanne's side. If Jack turned out to be another one who would stick to her, Lucian would not dare to imagine how he would react. After what seemed like an eternity, there was no response from Lucian. Therefore, Jonathan tried to enlighten him sincerely. Since I've made things clear, do you still intend to feign ignorance? I've put in a lot of effort so Dr. Jarvis can remain in Chinara this round. If others become the ones to benefit from it, I won't be able to accept that even if you can bear with it. On the heels of that, there was another round of silence. When Jonathan was at a loss for words to advise Lucian, the latter eventually muttered. Next, he hung up on Jonathan before the latter came to his senses. Catching sight of the phone screen darkening, Jonathan was bereft of speech. My goodness! How could he only respond nonchalantly after I've said so much? What does he mean by that? Jonathan had sensed Lucian's feelings toward Roxanne, and the woman was even Estella's biological mother. Since then, he had been giving his all to help Lucian with that. Nevertheless, he was speechless about the duo's current state after putting in so much effort. He was worried stiff when Lucian even quarreled with Roxanne. That was why he hinted at Lucian, hoping he would take prompt action. It never occurred to him that the latter would remain unperturbed. Consequently, Jonathan started having an awful headache. At the Farwell residence, Lucian stood outside Estella's room for a long time after hanging up. Devoid of expression, he was preoccupied with the snippets of Roxanne alongside another man. Humph! That hard-hearted woman left without a second thought years ago, and I've been tracking her down for 6 years. Now that Roxanne was back, Lucian would never let her be closely acquainted with other men. He had already blown a gasket after seeing her interactions with Larry several times lately. Since she'll collaborate with Jack Damaris, they'll cross paths more often inevitably. If something happens between them. At the thought of that, Lucian's face turned grim. It was as though there was a drastic drop in the temperature around him. No way! I won't let that happen. As for Roxanne, I can't let her continue avoiding me. Because of Jonathan's first-hand information, Lucian had been racking his brain the following days on how he could mend his relationship with Roxanne. He had been sending Estella to and fetching her from the kindergarten lately, hoping to run into Roxanne so he could talk things out with her. Unexpectedly, she did not show up at all in the following days. As a result, Lucian could not help but despise himself for having such a ridiculous idea. I have lost count of the days she's been trying to hide from me. Even Estella has accepted the indisputable fact that she might not be able to meet her again. Why am I still anticipating bumping into her here? Daddy! Estella's mellifluous voice sounded abruptly in the car when Lucian fell into a trance. He furrowed his brows as he regained his composure before turning to look at Estella quizzically. Seeing that she had managed to attract her father's attention, Estella uttered sweetly, "Ms. Ward told us that our kindergarten will hold an anniversary celebration." Lucian nodded. What about it? Needless to say, he was aware of it. As he had invested in the kindergarten, the management had requested his permission when they planned to organize the event. However, he could not fathom why Estella suddenly brought up the subject. There was unmissable anticipation in Estella's eyes as she piped up. "Ms. Ward told us everyone has to perform during the anniversary celebration. Our parents have to join too." With that, she gazed at her father eagerly. It was clear enough for Lucian to get what she meant. If parents are requested to join, Ms. Jarvis will surely show up too. Then if she tries to avoid us and refuses to speak to me, it's good enough that I can have the chance to see her. Lucian's gaze darkened as he looked intently at the anticipation in Estella's eyes. He nodded indifferently. Okay. I know. Hearing that, Estella tilted her head with a look of disappointment on her face. Initially, she expected Lucian would share the same sentiments as her. It never came to her that he would only respond with sheer indifference. Does it mean Daddy doesn't like Ms. Jarvis anymore? Oblivious to what was playing in Estella's mind, Lucian only hummed nonchalantly before retracting his gaze. Even so, he could not overlook the frustration surging from within him. He knew fully well that Estella wished to grab the opportunity to meet Roxanne. Nonetheless, he yearned for more. He was not satisfied with just seeing her and vowed to find ways to mend their relationship. As the thought occurred to him, Lucian could not help but feel his temples start throbbing. He was sure that Roxanne would not spare them any glance if they had the chance to bump into her during the occasion. Catching sight of Estella having her meal gloomily, Lucian could not restrain himself from questioning. "Essie, what's the matter? Why are you unhappy?" Estella pouted her lips and grumbled, "You don't like Ms. Jarvis anymore." Flabbergasted, Lucian was silent for a few seconds before querying desperately, "What makes you say that?" Down in the dumps, Estella stared at him. "We can finally meet Ms. Jarvis during the anniversary celebration. But you don't seem to look forward to it at all." Lucian's brows twitched uncontrollably as he refuted, "That's not true." Stella threw him a glance doubtfully. "Daddy didn't look excited at all in the car just now. Even when he's denying it now, he doesn't look glad at all. He's bluffing." Sensing Estella's doubt, Lucian frowned resignedly. "I only can't help thinking we can't carry on like this." Perplexed, Estella tilted her head. Lucian stroked Estella's head affectionately. Deep down, he knew he needed her help to mend his relationship with Roxanne. "Oh! Why don't I make things clear with her now? Essie, you like Ms. Jarvis, don't you?" "Humph! After all, she's determined to keep a distance from us." He had no choice but to exercise restraint. Otherwise, it would only exacerbate the situation. Subsequently, he and Estella each had something on their mind. None of them uttered any words along the way home. Back in the Farwell residence, Lucian only noticed that Estella seemed to be in low spirits. He knitted his brows in bafflement. Wasn't she in high spirits in the car a while ago? So why is she suddenly upset? Since she's paying no heed to us, don't you think we should take the initiative first? He guided her patiently. Estella nodded fervently. Essie, if Ms. Jarvis shows up during the anniversary celebration, go to look for her, okay? Lucian asked. Estella was more than willing to do so. Thus, she nodded without thinking twice. Lucian nodded slightly, racking his brain on what excuse he could use to approach Roxanne that day. Just as his head was aching, the screen of his phone on the table lit up. Lucian grabbed it instinctively to have a glimpse. It was a message sent by Pippa to the parents' group chat. Dear parents, our kindergarten will arrange for our students to have stage performances during the anniversary celebration. We sincerely hope that all of you can attend it and watch their performances. Apart from that, we plan to have our students perform a play together with their parents on the stage. It is to strengthen the relationship between the students and their parents. Thus, we look forward to everyone's cooperation. At the sight of the message, Lucian felt his heart flutter. At that instant, one of the parents responded with a question. Is it compulsory for everyone to take part in the play? How will the performers be confirmed? Pippa replied, we hope that everyone can take part. However, parents who can't make it can contact me directly. As for the parents who can take part, we'll divide everyone into groups. I'll share the team list here once the list of parents participating is confirmed. Everyone agreed in unison. The moment Lucian realized everyone would be divided into groups, he arched his brows as something popped into his mind. After replying to Pippa's message in the group chat, he called Caden right away. Caden had just had his dinner when his phone rang with Lucian's name blinking on the screen. He answered it at once. Meanwhile, Roxanne hesitated when she read the text message sent in the group chat. She had just sealed the deal with the Damaris family, and it was expected of her to adjust her schedule according to the request of the Damaris family. Hence, she was not sure if she would be busy then. Moreover, she had to attend the anniversary celebration. With that said, she would inevitably run into either Lucian or Estella, or both. She could not bear to see the sad puppy eyes of Estella. While Archie and Benny were discussing the anniversary celebration with her, they saw the message posted by Pippa in the group chat. Upon noticing the worrisome look on Roxanne's face, they asked cautiously, "Will you go, Mommy?" Their tone of voice put her in a quandary. "If I don't go, would you two be able to attend the event on your own?" The boys exchanged a glance and shook their heads vigorously. "We want you to be there, Mommy." Actually, the two kids were not bothered if Roxanne was absent. Farwell, what can I do for you?" Lucian instructed solemnly, "Get in touch with the head of the kindergarten. Tell him to talk Roxanne into attending the anniversary celebration this round. On top of that, request him to arrange Essie and her two kids in the same team." Caden was clueless about the series of activities during the anniversary celebration of the kindergarten. Even so, he dared not dawdle to carry out the mission as instructed by his boss. Right after Lucian hung up, Caden called the head of the kindergarten to relay the former's instruction. The latter agreed with that readily. However, they thought about the chance of their mother running into Estella if she were to show up at the anniversary celebration. It's been a long while since Mommy has paid Essie a visit. We really want to cheer Essie up. Roxanne frowned instead of answering immediately. Benny put up a pitiful face and stared into Roxanne's eyes. Mommy, this is the very first time we're going to perform on stage. Right then, Archie chimed in, we really want you to watch our performance. Little children like us will get stage fright if Mommy isn't there. Roxanne found it amusing to hear Archie express his fears so solemnly, but she acknowledged their desire to want her there. Even though she was not sure if the boys were up to anything, she did not want to miss the kids' first ever performance. After mulling it over for a long time, she agreed, "Okay, I got it. I'll accompany you to the celebration." With that, Roxanne exited the chat with Pippa. Initially, she wanted to inform the latter that she would be absent on the day of the event. However, the eagerness of the children changed her mind. She did not have the heart to disappoint them. When Archie and Benny heard that their mother said yes, they cheered excitedly. Both of them hugged Roxanne and exclaimed dotingly, "Thanks, Mommy! We love you the most!" Roxanne smiled and patted their heads. Afterward, her phone buzzed. Roxanne took a peek and saw that it was a message from Pippa. "Ms. Jarvis, would you be coming to the anniversary celebration?" Roxanne was briefly stunned by the teacher's question and wondered why she would purposely ask her that. During the last tree planting event, Ms. Ward just assumed my presence. I don't remember her personally checking up on me for a response. Just as she was still puzzled over the strange gesture, Pippa seemed to have sensed the awkwardness. Therefore, the latter quickly added another line to explain herself. "The upcoming school event is rather important." Thus, the school leader requested the teachers to confirm with all parents. With her question answered, Roxanne did not dwell much on it anymore. She replied, "Don't worry, Ms. Ward. I'll be there on time for the event and participate actively." "Thanks for asking." Pippa heaved a sigh of relief when she received a favorable response from Roxanne. After having brief small talk, Pippa exited the chat and sent the screenshot of her conversation with Roxanne to Jeffrey, the head of the kindergarten. Jeffrey instructed Pippa to get Roxanne's confirmation. In the case Roxanne declined the invitation to the celebration, Pippa was asked to persuade her accordingly. When Pippa approached Roxanne, she was worried that the latter would say no. Should that happen, the former had to come up with an excuse to make Roxanne change her mind. Fortunately, none of her worries came true. After updating Jeffrey, Pippa received an instant reply. Put Ms. Estella Farwell on the same team as her two children. Pippa did not dare to question Jeffrey's intention. He assumed that Estella had requested to be on the same team as the boys. Hence, she agreed. When Roxanne was having lunch the next day, she saw Pippa's text in the group chat. It was about the kids' activity grouping. Upon clicking the link, she caught her name at the top of the list right away. It was followed by Lucian's name. Roxanne was flabbergasted. She checked it once more and even queried the teacher. Ward, am I supposed to read the name list horizontally or vertically? Oh no, it's Murphy's Law. If it was arranged horizontally, I'll be in the same group as Lucian. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Pippa replied in a jiffy, "Hi, Ms. Jarvis, please read it horizontally." Roxanne's expression froze at the sight of the message. Refusing to give up, she asked once more to try her luck, "May I switch to another team?" Meanwhile, Pippa was helping other parents to regroup the other kids. When she read Roxanne's text, she felt bad for not doing her a favor. She responded, "I'm sorry, Ms. Jarvis. The groups have been fixed, and we can't change them anymore. In addition, it has been submitted to Mr. Bauer. If there's any reason to amend the list, we'll need to seek Mr. Bauer's advice." Pippa figured that since Jeffrey had given her a specific instruction, it was better for her to bring up Jeffrey's name when the scenario did not quite go as planned. A trace of strong resistance appeared in Roxanne's eyes. She frowned at Pippa's reply. Shortly after, Pippa sent her another text. It read, "We've considered various aspects before grouping the kids together. Among all the classmates, Essie is the closest to Archie and Benny. If we let Essie work with other families, I'm afraid she won't participate in the stage play. Thank you for your understanding." At the mention of Estella, Roxanne's heart softened. As much as she rejected the idea of being grouped with Lucian and Estella, she agreed with Pippa's rationale. He could not imagine how the little girl could feel comfortable around other families. After much hesitating, she thanked Pippa and ended the conversation despite feeling very troubled by it. She had prepared herself to bump into Lucian and Estella at the anniversary celebration. However, she did not expect to be in the same team as them. Suddenly, she lost all of her appetite. She took a few mouthfuls, switched off her phone, and left. There was still a strand of hope in her, thinking that there would not be much intimate interaction with the father-daughter duo since it was a kindergarten play. It's probably just a fairy tale or a fable. By the time she returned home in the evening, the boys were already back. At the sight of Archie and Benny, Roxanne's smile became stiff. She could not help but be reminded of the upcoming collaboration with Lucian on the school play. On the contrary, the boys who were aware of the groupings were over the moon and anxious at the same time. On the one hand, they were looking forward to performing with Estella. On the other hand, they were reluctant to face Lucian, knowing that Roxanne had no intention of crossing paths with him. Yet, there was only one way they could perform with Estella, which was to be on the same team as Lucian. They were scared that Roxanne would change her mind and not show up at the anniversary celebration the moment she found out about the arrangement. At that thought, the boys fell very silent and did not mention a word about the event. Roxanne found their reactions strange and took a wild guess. "Have you guys heard about the grouping?" Her question made their hearts skip a beat. The kids stared at each other nervously. No one uttered anything in response. Moments later, Benny posed a question cautiously, "Did you find out about it, Mommy?" Roxanne nodded firmly. "Ms. Ward sent the list this afternoon." After hearing Roxanne's reply, Archie and Benny became concerned. "So, are you still going, Mommy?" they asked. Roxanne read their minds, and shook her head passively. The two boys thought she meant she was not going, so they anxiously tugged at her and whined. "Mommy, you gave us your promise, so you can't take back your word." If you don't want to talk to Mr. Farwell, we will keep him from you." Roxanne was amused by their reactions. She ruffled their hair affectionately and assured them, "Don't worry. Since I gave you my word, I will definitely honor it. Moreover, Ms. Ward has already finalized the groupings, so mommy can't possibly trouble her to make changes now, can I?" The boys heaved a sigh of relief upon hearing her assurance. However, Roxanne's heart sank as she thought about the one she had to partner with. "Do you know which play we are doing?" she probed. She heard from Pippa that the children drew lots to see which play they would be involved in, so she was positive Archie and Benny knew the answer. Upon hearing her question, Benny ran to his bag and dug into it for a while. Then he came back with a piece of crumpled paper, likely the piece they got from the draw earlier that day. Roxanne froze on the spot after she took a look at that piece of paper. Neatly written on the paper were the words Sleeping Beauty. For the benefit of the children, their teacher even added phonetic alphabets under the words. "Mommy, do you know this story?" Benny looked up at Roxanne and curiously asked. Roxanne did not have the habit of reading bedtime stories to the boys. On the rare occasions when she did, she also would not pick fairy tales about princes and princesses for the boys. As such, the fairy tale Sleeping Beauty was alien to Archie and Benny. Roxanne was at a loss for words, not knowing how to answer Benny's question about the storyline. Her mind was on the play. She could imagine the roles of Sleeping Beauty and the prince would likely fall on her and Lucian. Knowing how the storyline was, she became anxious. If she had known earlier that their play was Sleeping Beauty, Oxonine would never have agreed to participate. Alas, it was too late for her to back out. After contemplating for a while, Roxanne looked at the kids and said, "Mommy's going to make a phone call, so you boys should stay quiet and don't make too much noise, okay?" The kids obediently nodded their heads. Roxanne took out her phone and called Jeffrey Bauer, the head of the kids' kindergarten. Pippa had told her in the afternoon that only Jeffrey could make changes to the groupings for the plays. Roxanne desperately wanted to switch to another group. If that was not possible, she would request a change in the play. She frowned and disappointedly hung up after receiving a busy tone. After a short wait, she was about to call again when Jeffrey returned her call. "Hi, Ms. Jarvis. Sorry I missed your call. How can I help you?" Jeffrey asked. Roxanne apologetically replied. "I'm so sorry for calling you at this hour, Mr. Bauer. May I know if it's still possible to make changes to the groupings for the anniversary celebration performances?" At the other end of the phone, a conscience-stricken expression appeared on Jeffrey's face when he heard Roxanne's request. He was quick to compose himself and patiently explained, "As you know, our kindergarten is a little different from the usual ones in that all the parents are busy professionals. The groupings for the performances were finalized after many rounds of consultation and discussion with all the parents. If we wish to make any changes, we'll have to go through another tedious round of coordination with the other parents. I'm afraid that's going to be challenging. Moreover, our activities for the anniversary celebration are about to commence next week." Since her request was going to make things difficult for others, Roxanne could not insist on it. She smiled in resignation and said, "In that case, don't worry about it. We'll leave it as it is." Almost immediately, Jeffrey replied, "Thank you for your understanding, Ms. Jarvis. If there's nothing else, I'll end this call with you. Other parents are trying to reach me as well, so I'll have to get back to them." He was in a hurry to hang up, seemingly worried that Roxanne would change her mind. After ending the call with Jeffrey, Roxanne stared blankly at the crumpled piece of paper with the words Sleeping Beauty on it. The two boys noticed her reaction and gingerly called out, "Mommy!" Roxanne looked at them with downcast eyes. Seeing that their mom seemed disheartened, the boys anxiously asked, "Mommy, you don't like that play?" She nodded, which aroused the curiosity in the boys. "Why? Is it a terrible story? Can you tell us that story?" they asked. Roxanne frowned slightly and bit her lips, feeling a little awkward. I will tell you the story another day," she finally replied. She highly suspected she and Lucian would be given the lead roles for the play. "If we are to make any changes now, we may not have sufficient time for rehearsals. I can foresee that's going to affect the performance." He gave Roxanne the impression that her request would make things difficult for everyone. After the subtle rejection, he asked with concern, "Is there any particular reason for you wanting to switch to another group?" Horrified by the idea of her being Sleeping Beauty with Lucian as her prince, she became despondent and was not in the mood for storytelling. She prayed hard that the kindergarten would modify the story to cater to the audience of young kids. Roxanne's reaction triggered the interest of Archie and Benny in Sleeping Beauty. Aware that Roxanne was not keen to tell them, they decided not to pursue further. They merely asked, "Mommy, you're still going to participate?" "Right." Roxanne nodded with a heavy heart. She kept checking her phone to see if Pippa would provide more updates with regard to the script of the play. After a few minutes, a notification came in. It was a message from Pippa in the group chat for parents. Roxanne pursed her lips nervously and read the message. Pippa had sent an attachment. It was the file that listed the participants in each group and their respective plays. Ms. Rohanna Jarvis and Mr. Lucian Farwell will be doing Sleeping Beauty. The other plays were also fairy tales, such as The Little Match Girl and Little Red Riding Hood. It was obvious the kindergarten had made conscious efforts to choose stories with varied themes. Lee was just unfortunate for Roxanne that she got a love story. Roxanne was troubled. She stole a look at her boys and secretly bemoaned her bad luck for having gotten Sleeping Beauty as their play. Another message from Pippa came in, "Dear parents, please join us for a meeting at the kindergarten tomorrow to discuss the script for the plays." The other parents started replying to Pippa's message to confirm their attendance. Although she was feeling dispirited, Roxanne obligingly replied, "Noted. I'll be there." Noted. Sleeping Beauty, with Ms. Jarvis. Lucian replied and tagged Roxanne in his reply. His reply caused quite a stir within the group, given that he was usually a group chat ghost. Roxanne was about to move on when she saw the tag notification. Surprised, she went back into the group chat and read Lucian's reply. There was a long period of silence after Lucian's reply, and the active exchange in that group suddenly died down. Roxanne had no idea if the other parents were too stunned by Lucian's involvement or if they were waiting for her reply. She stared at Lucian's message for a long time, frowning slightly as she speculated on Lucian's intention. Troubled and confused, she finally decided not to pay attention to that group chat and went offline. Archie and Benny were quietly sitting next to Roxanne, observing her. They became anxious when they detected her mood change, worried that she would decide to withdraw from the play. "We're sleepy, Mommy. Can we go back to our room?" The boys pretended to yawn while they secretly watched for Roxanne's reaction. The next message that came in immediately after Roxanne's reply was Lucian's short one-word reply. Although his reply was curt, it attracted lots of attention as he almost never responded to messages in the group chat previously. A curious parent wrote, "Are you joining us in the anniversary celebration activities this year, Mr. Farwell? Which play are you in, and who is your partner?" That parent even tagged Lucian in the message. Roxanne's mind stopped wandering, and her attention was successfully directed back to the boys. She rubbed their heads lovingly and said, "Sure. Let's have an early night. Mommy will send you to school tomorrow." The boys' eyes lit up upon hearing that, and they excitedly nodded their heads. Roxanne put on a forced smile, brought the kids to their room, and tucked them in. After she left and the boys heard her closing the door to her room, they cautiously opened their eyes and sat up in their beds. "Archie, do you know the story about Sleeping Beauty?" Benny stared at Archie in the dark and asked, curious. The boys had noticed Roxanne's mood changes throughout the evening. When she heard they were in the same group as Lucian, she was a little apprehensive but accepted without complaints. However, after realizing the play they were going to do was Sleeping Beauty, Roxanne became visibly troubled. Moreover, she refused to tell them the storyline. Archie thought about it briefly and climbed out of his bed. He turned on the computer and said, "We can go online to search for it." Benny's eyes lit up and he hurried over to Archie's side. Archie quickly typed in the search word, and in no time, they found what they were looking for. The two stared at the screen intently, reading about the story. At the end of the story, there was an illustration. Sleeping Beauty was lying in bed, dressed in a pretty gown, and the prince was bent over her, giving her a kiss. The boys blinked their eyes as their little brains processed the information. They reckoned they had found the reason for Roxanne's resistance to the play. The boys knew Roxanne and Lucian would take the roles of Sleeping Beauty and the prince. Since she disliked him, she would definitely not want to be acting out that kissing scene with him. The boys felt bad for Roxanne. Pippa was already waiting by the gate when Roxanne arrived with her boys. He smiled and greeted them. "Hi, Ms. Jarvis. It has been a long time," Pippa said. Roxanne politely smiled and replied, "I've been busy at work lately." "Did Archie and Benny give you any trouble?" Roxanne suspected the boys might have done something wrong in school, resulting in their strange behavior that morning. Surprisingly, Pippa shook her head and said, "Not at all. Archie and Benny are really good boys. Sometimes, they even help me look after other kids. I have to thank you for bringing up such sensible boys." Roxanne lowered her eyes and looked at the two boys that were standing by her side. They looked up to her with wide-eyed innocence, leaving her perplexed. Seeing that they were not going to let her in on their secret, she gave up and looked away. "Ms. Jarvis." A sweet, childlike voice rang out from behind Roxanne. Roxanne turned around and saw Estella running toward her as fast as her tiny legs could take her. They wanted her to participate in the play with them so Estella could get to spend time with her. However, they also understood her hesitation about being kissed by Lucian in the play. Daddy and Mommy kissing. The boys turned to look at one another, and their eyes sparkled with anticipation. Although they did not really like Lucian, deep in their heart, they wished to see their family being united. They began to look forward to seeing their parents being together, especially their intimate interaction. Her chubby little face was turning red from the exertion. The little girl was dressed in an adorable dress and had a head full of curly hair. Roxanne was stunned by the sight of Estella's curly hair. She bent over and hesitantly asked, "What happened to your hair, Essie?" She remembered Estella had naturally straight hair and wondered who styled her hair. Estella tugged at her own hair and innocently said, "Grandma." Grandma said all princesses have curly hair. Sonia was aware of the kindergarten's anniversary celebration. She heard Estella was going to act in the play. So she excitedly brought the little girl to the salon to style her hair. Lucian did not want to quarrel with his mother over such a small matter, so he let her be. When Estella mentioned Sonia, Roxanne's heart became heavy, and she instinctively stood up and took a step away from the little girl. Estella could sense her change in attitude. She tilted her head in confusion and looked disappointed. It pained Roxanne to have to put a distance between herself and the little girl, but she had to do so. Realizing she had overlooked something, Roxanne looked behind Estella, and true enough, she saw Lucian walking toward them. Dressed in an expensive tailored suit, Lucian strode regally in her direction, his gaze fixed intently on Estella and her. Roxanne quickly looked away when her eyes met Lucian's. She grabbed her boy's hands and turned to walk into the school compound. Although she knew she would have to work with Lucian and Estella due to their collaboration in the play, she wanted to delay their interactions as long as possible. "Hello, Mr. Farwell." Roxanne heard Pippa greet Lucian respectfully as she hurried past the gate. He was too slow as Lucian had already caught up with them. Lucian gave Pippa a small nod in acknowledgement. Then his gaze swiftly swept to Roxanne, who was back facing him and walking away in a hurry. Roxanne had a prickling feeling on her back and could sense he was looking at her. "It has been a long time, Ms. Jarvis." Lucian greeted her as he walked to her side, Estella in tow. Roxanne's heart skipped a beat when she heard his voice. Scenes of them parting unhappily after their last meeting juxtaposed with the kissing scene in Sleeping Beauty and flashed in her mind. She got flustered and did not know how to face him. "Ms. Jarvis." Estella spoke, gingerly tugging on Roxanne's outfit. Roxanne dropped her gaze and saw the little girl piteously looking at her with her big round eyes. She seemed to be asking why Roxanne was ignoring her. Roxana was ruffled by her puppy dog eyes, but she could only return a forced smile. Lucian noticed her uneasiness with Estella. His brows furrowed, but he quickly hid his emotions and said, "We are counting on your support to make the play a success, Ms. Jarvis. This will be the kids' first performance, so I hope you can set aside your personal feelings for the benefit of the kids." Roxanne's expression froze. Her heart was in turmoil, but she put on a nonchalant front. She casually nodded her head and replied, "Don't worry. I will." As his gaze swept past her face, he could see she had pursed her lips and looked indifferent. She was too slow as Lucian had already caught up with them. Lucian gave Pippa a small nod in acknowledgement. Then his gaze swiftly swept to Roxanne, who was back facing him and walking away in a hurry. Roxanne had a prickling feeling on her back and could sense he was looking at her. "It has been a long time, Ms. Jarvis," Lucian greeted her as he walked to her side, Estella in tow. Roxanne's heart skipped a beat when she heard his voice. Scenes of them parting unhappily after their last meeting juxtaposed with the kissing scene in Sleeping Beauty and flashed in her mind. She got flustered and did not know how to face him. Very obviously, she had no intention of engaging with him. Lucian lowered his gaze and exchanged a knowing look with Estella. The little girl got the hint, moved over, and clung to Roxanne, asking, "Are you still very busy, Ms. Jarvis?" Roxanne could not bear to ignore the little girl anymore. She hesitated for a moment, then replied, "Yes, I'm still busy. But since we promised to take part in the anniversary celebration, I'll make time to join you in your rehearsals." Estella's eyes instantly lit up when she heard that, joy written all over her face. Roxanne noticed the change in Estella, and her heart melted. She could no longer behave coldly toward the little girl. On the way to the classroom, Estella chattered with Roxanne, who entertained her tenderly. As they stepped into the classroom, Roxanne felt all eyes were on them. A bewildered Roxanne stopped in her tracks, turned to Archie and Benny, and asked, "Are we in the wrong classroom?" The boys shook their heads and said, "No. This is our classroom." Roxanne nodded, then looked up and saw that the other parents were giving her a weird look. She was puzzled. She had met those parents before, so she could not understand the hint of jealousy she detected in the air. "It has been a while, Ms. Jarvis." Roxanne was trying to convince herself to ignore the unwelcome attention when a lady came up to her and greeted her. She was taken aback. It was the mother of one of her boys' classmates. She had met that lady at the class outing to the Botanic Garden the last time, although she did not recall talking to her. Later, Roxanne found out that lady was Cassandra Clark. Cassandra sneaked a look at the man behind Roxanne, then moved in and cozied to her. Taken aback, Roxanne subconsciously stepped back and found herself knocking onto a muscular chest, losing her balance. Immediately, a hand reached out and held onto her by her waist to steady her. Suddenly, the whole classroom turned eerily silent, and Roxanne could tell all attention was on her. After a brief daze, she quickly realized what had happened. She stumbled out of Lucian's arm, grabbed Archie and Benny by their hands, and stepped away from Lucian. At that moment, she wished the ground would open up and swallow her. She tried all ways and means to keep her distance from Lucian, yet he publicly made such an intimate gesture for all to see. Roxanne's heart was still pounding wildly, and she had not noticed Cassandra walking up to her. "From the looks of it, Ms. Jarvis is really close to Mr. Farwell." Cassandra looked at Roxanne from head to toe with an enigmatic expression. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.